Story 4 of the Fairy Ring. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Shirley Anderson. The Fairy Ring, edited by Kate Douglas Wiggin and Nora Archibald Smith. Story 4, The Bear and Skrattel. One Christmas Day the King of Norway sat in the great hall of his palace, holding a feast. "Here's a health," said he, "to our brother, the King of Denmark. What present shall we send our royal brother as a pledge of our goodwill this Christmas time?" "Send him, please your Majesty," said the Norseman Gunther, who was the King's chief huntsman, "one of our fine white bears, that his liegemen may show their little ones what sort of kittens we play with." "Well said, Gunther," cried the King. "But how shall we find a bear that will travel so long a journey willingly, and will know how to behave himself to our worthy brother when he reaches him?" "Please your Majesty," said Gunther, "I have a glorious fellow as white as snow, that I caught when he was a cub. He will follow me wherever I go, play with my children, stand on his hind legs, and behave himself as well as any gentleman ought to do. He is at your service, and I myself will take him wherever you choose." So the King was well pleased, and ordered Gunther to set off at once with Master Bruin. "Start with the morning's dawn," said he, "and make the best of your way." The Norseman went home to his house in the forest, and early next morning he walked Master Bruin, put the King's collar round his neck, and away they went over rocks and valleys, lakes and seas, the nearest road to the court of the King of Denmark. When they arrived there the King was away on a journey, and Gunther and his fellow traveller set out to follow. It was bright weather, the sun shone, and the birds sang, as they journeyed merrily on, day after day, over hill and over dale, till they came within a day's journey of where the King was. All that afternoon they travelled through a gloomy, dark forest, but toward evening the wind began to whistle through the trees, and the clouds began to gather and threaten a stormy night. The road, too, was very rough, and it was not easy to tell which was more tired, Bruin or his master. What made matters the worse was that they had found no inn that day by the roadside, and their provisions had fallen short, so that they had no very pleasant prospect before them for the night. "A pretty affair this," said Gunther. "I am likely to be charmingly off here in the woods, with an empty stomach, a damp bed, and a bear for my bedfellow." While the Norseman was turning this over in his mind, the wind blew harder and harder, and the clouds grew darker and darker. The bear shook his ears, and his master looked at his wits' end, when to his great joy a woodman came whistling along, out of the woods, by the side of his horse, dragging a load of faggots. As soon as he came up Gunther stopped him, and begged hard for a night's lodging for himself and his countrymen. The woodman seemed hearty and good-natured enough, and was ready to find shelter for the huntsman, but as to the bear, he had never seen such a beast before in his life, and would have nothing to do with him on any terms. The huntsman begged hard for his friend, and told how he was bringing him as a present to the King of Denmark, and how he was the most good-natured, best-behaved animal in the world, though he must allow that he was by no means one of the handsomest. The woodman, however, was not to be moved. His wife, he was sure, would not like such a guest, and who could say what he might take it into his head to do? Besides, he should lose his dog and his cat, his ducks and his geese, for they would all run away for fright, whether the bear was disposed to be friends with them or not. "Good night, Master Huntsman," said he. "If you and old Shaggy back there cannot part, I'm afraid you must e'en stay where you are, though you will have a sad night of it, no doubt." Then he cracked his whip, whistled up his horse, and set off once more on his way homeward. The huntsman grumbled and Bruin grunted as they followed shortly after, when to their great joy they saw the woodman, before he had gone many yards, pull up his horse once more and turn round. "Stay, stay," said he. "I think I can tell you of a better plan than sleeping in a ditch. I know where you may find shelter, if you will run the risk of a little trouble from an unlucky imp that has taken up its abode in my old house, down the hill yonder. You must know, friend, that till last winter I lived in yon snug little house that you will see at the foot of the hill, if you come this way. Everything went smoothly on with us till one unlucky night, when the storm blew as it seems likely to do to-night. Some spiteful guest took it into his head to pay us a visit, and there have ever since been such noises, clattering and scumping upstairs and down, from midnight till the cock crows in the morning, that at last we were fairly driven out of house and home. What he is like no one knows, for we never saw him or anything belonging to him, except a little crooked high-heeled shoe that he left one night in the pantry. But though we have not seen him, we know he has a hand or a paw as heavy as lead, for when it pleases him to lay it upon anyone, down he goes as if the blacksmith's hammer had hit him. There is no end of his monkey tricks. If the linen is hung out to dry, he cuts the line. If he wants a cup of ale, he leaves the tap running. If the fowls are shut up, he lets them loose. He puts the pig into the garden, rides upon the cows, and turns the horses into the hay yard, and several times he nearly burned the house down by leaving a candle alight among the faggots. And then he is sometimes so nimble and active that when he is once in motion nothing stands still around him. Dishes and plates, pots and pans dance about, clattering, making the most horrible music, and breaking each other into pieces, and sometimes, when the whim takes him, the chairs and tables seem as if they were alive, and dancing a hornpipe or playing battledore and shuttlecock together. Even the stones and beams of the house seem rattling against one another, and it is of no use putting things in order, for the first freak the imp took would turn everything upside down again. My wife and I bore such a lodger as long as we could, but at length we were fairly beaten, and as he seemed to have taken up his abode in the house, we thought it best to give up to him what he wanted, and the little rascal knew what we were about when we were moving, and seemed afraid we should not go soon enough, so he helped us off, for on the morning we were to start, as we were going to put our goods upon the waggon, there it stood before the door ready loaded. And when we started, we heard a loud laugh, and a sharp little voice cried out of the window, "Good-bye, neighbours!" So now he has our old house all to himself to play his gambols in, whenever he likes to sleep within doors, and we have built ourselves a snug cottage on the other side of the hill, where we live as well as we can, though we have no great room to make merry in. Now if you and your ugly friend there like to run the hazard of taking up your quarters in the elf's house, pray do. Yonder is the road. He may not be at home tonight. "We will try our luck," said Gunter. "Anything is better to my mind than sleeping out of doors such a night as this. Your troublesome neighbour will perhaps think so too, and we may have to fight for our lodging. But never mind, Bruin is rather an awkward hand to quarrel with, and the goblin may perhaps find a worse welcome from him than your house dog could give him. He will at any rate let him know what a bear's hug is, for I dare say he has not been far enough north to know much about it yet." Then the woodman gave Gunter a faggot to make his fire with, and wished him a good night. He and the bear soon found their way to the deserted house, and no one being at home, they walked into the kitchen and made a capital fire. "Lack-a-day!" said the Norseman, "I forgot one thing. I ought to have asked that good man for some supper. I have nothing left but some dry bread. However, this is better than sleeping in the woods. We must make the most of what we have, keep ourselves warm, and get to bed as soon as we can." So after eating up all their crusts, and drinking some water from the well close by, the huntsman wrapped himself up close in his cloak, and lay down in the snuggest corner he could find. Bruin rolled himself up in the corner of the wide fireplace, and both were fast asleep, the fire out, and everything quiet within doors long before midnight. Just as the clock struck 12 the storm began to get louder. The wind blew. A slight noise within the room wakened the huntsman, and all in a sudden in popped a little ugly Skrattel, scarce 3 spans high, with a hump on his back, a face like a dried pippin, a nose like a ripe mulberry, and an eye that had lost its neighbour. He had high-heeled shoes and a pointed red cap, and came dragging after him a nice fat kid, ready skinned and fit for roasting. "A rough night this," grumbled the goblin to himself, "but, thanks to that booby woodman, I've a house to myself, and now for a hot supper and a glass of good ale till the cock crows." No sooner said than done. The Skrattel busied himself about here and there. Presently the fire blazed up, the kid was put on a spit, and turned merrily round. A keg of ale made its appearance from a closet, the cloth was laid, and the kid was soon dished up for eating. Then the little imp, in the joy of his heart, rubbed his hands, tossed up his red cap, danced before the hearth, and sang his song. "Oh, 'tis weary enough abroad to ride in the shivery midnight blast, and 'tis dreary enough to bide, hungry and cold, on the wintry wold, where the drifting snow falls fast. But 'tis cheery enough to revel by night in the crackling faggot's light. 'Tis merry enough to have and to hold the savoury roast and the nut